Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, and with us once again is the radical for capitalist, the objectivist philosopher and professor, all around swell fella extraordinaire, Mr. Andrew Bernstein, but I think we can call him Andy.
Yeah, yes, you can, Michael. It's always a pleasure being on your show.
So we've been doing a series where we've been talking about movies from the frame of reference of Ayn Rand's aesthetics theory, and this time around you had me watch Jeremiah Johnson with Robert Redford. It's interesting. I've been wanting to watch this movie for about 10 years because my sister, I didn't grow up with my sister and she was never in my life, but we connected while I was incarcerated. She wrote to me and we were writing back and forth. And she saw a picture of a friend of mine who has a very big beard, a bit bigger than yours. As a matter of fact, he's a school teacher. Maybe it's something with your profession. I don't know.
Could
But
be.
but she told me that his beard reminded her of the movie Jeremiah Johnson, and I had to see it, and I just hadn't gotten around to it until you suggested it. So I'm very very pleased you did. Great movie. So give us the synopsis before we really get into the nuts and bolts of the thing.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'll give you a little personal background. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. It came out in 1972 when I was in college, in Yankton, South Dakota, and I hitchhiked all the way down to Sioux City, Iowa, to see that film the first time. Loved it, and I've probably seen it 10 times since over the last 50 years. It's so heroic. But anyhow, yeah. Spoiler alerts here for all you people out there who haven't seen it. So Jeremiah Johnson was a U.S. Army veteran, Mexican War. Late 1840s. He decides, speaking of Romanticism as the school of volition, he makes a maybe perhaps insane choice. I want to be a mountain man. You know, he's never been in the Rockies before, and he goes and up the river. I don't know, maybe the Platte River on a riverboat. He outfits himself, gets the hawk and buffalo guns, at least it looked like buffalo guns to me, and a horse and a mule and the clothes. And he asks the guy, "Where can I find, good, critters worth trapping?" And the guy says to him, he says, "Walk straight to the Rocky." He says, "Walk straight." He says, "And make a left at the Rocky Mountains." He tells him. So anyhow, he goes up in the mountains and he's a pilgrim. In fact, Bearclaw, who he meets, another mountain man, calls him Pilgrim. Uh, and he's a tenderfoot, he doesn't know what he's doing. Poor guy. It's cold. I mean, you're in the Rockies, high elevation in the winter. It's brutally cold. He's in one scene. He's rubbing, like flints together to try and make a fire. And he's under these evergreens to try and keep out of the wind. He just gets a fire going, and this whole pile of snow falls. It's not funny. Whole pile of snow falls out of a tree onto his fire. And he's starving in one scene. He's trying to catch fish with his hands, and the Indian chief was watching him and just kind of shaking his head. This poor guy, he can't catch a fish. Anyhow, eventually he learns the ways of the mountain. He becomes a rugged mountain man. He meets Bear Claw. These guys, I love the characters in this movie, Michael. You know,
Bear Claw's a lunatic. He's fun. He's funny, but he's a lunatic.
they're all lunatics.
Yeah.
Who would live alone in the Rockies, in 1840s with the primitive, it's cold now if we go up into the Rockies and we have all modern equipment and stuff. You know,
It's cold outside my house.
no, I know. But yeah, but so Bear Claw hunts grizz. And that first scene, he says that can you skin Grizz, Pilgrim? And John, yeah, I can skin him as fast as you could get him. So, I mean, Bear Claw comes running with a grizzly bear chase of his, into this cabin. Skin that one, Pilgrim. I'll get you some more. But yeah, Bear Claw's a lunatic, but he teaches Jeremiah Johnson a lot of survival techniques on how to live in the mountains, and so he gets his expertise, and along the way he gets himself a family, right? There's a crazy woman whose family's been butchered by I don't know what tribe of Indians, but her young son survived, and she says to Jeremiah, "Take him." So he's gonna take the kid, who, by the way, throughout the entire movie doesn't say a single word. What's understandable how he's been traumatized watching his family been butchered. But he meets another mountain man called Delq, who's another lunatic, who's been buried up to his neck, in the sand by he's yelling. He's yelling and everything. And anyway, Jeremiah Johnson digs him out. They go into the camp of they take it into the camp of the Flathead Indians, who are peaceful, Christianized. And Jeremiah Johnson makes the mistake of offering the chief these pelts and I don't know the idea of crow ponies, but pelts that he had trapped, a big gift. And he didn't know, according to the traditions of the tribe, if you can't return a gift with an even greater gift, then they're going to kill you and kill you in the most savage ways. Delq says they're going to skin us alive with a dull deer antler or something. He says, and so the chief gives him his daughter, Swan. And
And he doesn't really want the daughter.
no,
He's not interested in this
no,
thing.
no, he does not in the least been interested in getting married, given the kind of life he's living. The brutal life he's living, and the rugged conditions. He's not interested in marriage. But as Delcuid tells him, they're gonna literally skin us alive if you say no. So he gets himself. Now he's got a wife and a kid, of whom, he wanted neither. But there was some touching scenes follow, Michael, where you see them building a cabin on the first night, their wedding night. And you see, even though in the movie they never show him learning to speak Flathead and never show her learning to speak English, they never communicate verbally. And yet you see them, come together, you see them bond and form, a real relationship that they come to love each other. And it's very touching. And,
Okay,
you know,
hold on now, because we're coming up to an important part, but I want to talk about that separately because I just want to tell you, I'm going to make a connection here. I bet you never thought you'd hear in all your life between the show Dancing with the Stars and the movie Jeremiah Johnson.
like that's a good connection. No, I
Well, I always find it, I don't know if heroic is the word, admirable, I think is a better word. When people step out of their comfort zone, right? When they're willing to take risks and to challenge themselves. And when I watched that show, Dancing with the Stars, at first I thought it was a silly show, a bunch of celebrities learning how to dance. But then I saw the effort and the time that they had to put into it. And these weren't professional dancers. And they put themselves through so much and challenged themselves so much in order to learn how to dance. And there was another show I used to watch called Into the Wild with Bear Grylls, and he was an ex-British Special Forces officer, and he would bring a celebrity into rough terrain. One time he took Shaquille O'Neal, and he would have them survive a couple days in the wilderness. And I used to just think like, wow, these people are really challenging themselves. And I don't know if it's something natural to us humans that we respect that when people do that, but I do. And when I was watching Jeremiah Johnson, he does the same thing. He's not a mountain man, but he goes and he sets himself up to live in the mountains and really struggle. And there's, I mean, a crazy scene where he goes and he finds this guy, and the guy's frozen solid.
oh yeah.
And the guy's got a rifle, and he's got a note on him. You can take this rifle. It's a good rifle. I just hope a white guy gets it.
Yeah, he
Right?
said it's good. Hatchet Jack
Hatchet Jack.
said
Yeah.
yeah, it killed it's a good rifle. It killed the bear that killed me.
Yeah, and just and he wrestles that gun from him, and I'm reminded of Charlton Heston. You can get this from my cold dead hands,
Yeah, yeah, right,
with
right.
the gun. But it really is an admirable quality in human beings when they do that, challenge themselves. And this film was really emblematic of that type of person.
Yeah. Oh, and on steroids. It would be a challenge if we went out there with some accomplished mountain man, like I did an Outward Bound, in the late '90s, and and that was a challenge, wilderness survival and everything. But I was with experts, and it was like 5 days, and it was the summer. But to go live there in the Rockies, and it's like it looks like it's the movie makes it look like it's winter, like 9 months out of the year. It was one scene where it's March, maybe April. It's still snowing. It's really cold. The wind's blowing. Yeah, that is a challenge above and beyond the Call of Duty. By the way, before we get back to Swan, Hatchet Jack when he, when he meets Delq, but Jeremiah Johnson meets Delq. And Delq, he tells him he got the rifle from Hatchet Jack. And he said, looks like Hatchet Jack's rifle. He said, and Jeremiah Johnson said, yes. And he tells him how he got it. And Delq shakes his head. Hatchet Jack, he goes, well, he was a wild one. He lived with a female panther in a cave for 2 years up in some mountain. And he says, I thought, as if that's not outrageous enough, he lived with a female panther. And then he said, he shakes his head. He goes, she never did get used to him. As if, the difficult part was the panther getting used to the human being, not the human being getting used to the panther. That's how crazy these guys are. But
You say crazy. In an email you said to me, this is when men were men. We should go do this out in the woods. And I told you, I replied, no, I preferred having my cell phone and,
yeah,
being able
well,
to watch television because I couldn't do that. I guess if you have to, you have to, but just like he makes the choice to
he
go
didn't have
live
to.
like that.
Yeah,
No,
he didn't have to.
and that's just, that's not for me. I like all my modern amenities that we
Yeah,
have.
I'm with you, Michael. And I was playing with you. I was playing
Yeah.
with that. I'm not going to live in the Rockies. In the summer, maybe it would. Even in the summer, up at that elevation, the nights are cold. Uh,
Maybe bring
but
some marshmallows, right? We could roast some marshmallows out
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Some hot
definitely.
cocoa.
Yeah, and a big old gun because there are still grizz roaming around out there, I think. Anyhow, so it's very touching. He and Swan bond. They come to love each other. You see the scenes where they're building the log cabin, and the boy never speaks, but he smiles, and you can see he comes alive, and they're a family. Uh, so there's the good news, is the happy part in the movie, and then he's dragged off by the U.S. Army to lead a rescue mission, and they
Okay,
got to go.
I want you to really because he wasn't just dragged off. This is a part of the movie that really struck me. And this is a part that I really want to delve into. So I want you to kind of paint the picture. I want you to use the great Brooklyn accent, all your animation, everything you can do to tell us exactly what transpires here.
There's a wagon train of white settlers stranded in the mountains, and there's an army patrol going to rescue them, but they need a guide, and they volunteer they volunteer Jeremiah Johnson. He doesn't want to go. This reminds me of the Odyssey, when of which there's a new movie version coming out like right about now. Uh, but Odysseus is dragged off to the war. He doesn't want to go. Uh, Jeremiah Johnson doesn't want to leave his wife and his son, but he gets guilted into it. And it's always a preacher who's a bad guy. And by the way, there's a great short story by Jack London. Gods of Their Fathers, I think is the name of it. Brutal, but a great story. And the preacher, the preacher is the bad guy, like in this scene. They guilt him into it. These are white Christians out there, Johnson. You can't leave them alone for your squaw. He's racist. The army officer's not that bad, but the preacher he's a racist. You got a squaw. These are white Christians. Like these are better people. In other words, you can't leave them. So he gets guilted into. I don't know if the guilt is what motivates him so much as he can help save innocent people. But anyway, the preacher certainly lays this kind of religious and racist guilt on him, and they come to a Crow burial ground, and Johnson says we can't go through here. This is big medicine for the Crow. They don't like trespassers in the first place. We're on their land. Although what they consider their land, and they certainly are going to be very unhappy if we go through their burial ground. We got to go around, but it turns out that would take like 2 days, and the army officer makes a command decision. He says, no, we don't have that kind of time. We got to go through. So he gets him to the wagon train, and he turns around and go back to his family, and he gets back to the Crow burial grounds, and he sees on the burial mounds on the trees, looks like ribbons or trinkets or something that belonged to Swan. And then he realized, oh my God. And he races home, but it's too late. The Crow have butchered his wife and his son. And it's just heartbreaking. and and you see how much he loved her, and probably the boy too, because and Robert Redford, I think is a, I think this is the finest acting performance of his career. And he made some great movies with Paul Newman.
Really?
I do.
You think it's better than when he played Sundance Kid?
Ah, well, I would say those Paul Newman film with Butch and the Kid, and The Sting, are great, but they're lighthearted. This is serious, and you can see the heartbreak. Just he has no one to talk to. You just see the heartbreak on his face. He's like psychologically, I won't say he's crushed, but he's near. He's too internally tough to be crushed, but he's as near to it as he could get, and you just see him, and the poignant scene. He's sitting there just devastated, and eventually his horse comes up, and stands by the door and awakens him to reality. The horse has to be taken care of, and the bodies have to be buried, but he doesn't bury them. He wraps them in blankets and leaves them in the cabin. He burns the cabin to the ground. He can't live there anymore. The
Now, this
memories are
was
too
his
painful.
makeshift family.
Yeah.
He had basically an adopted son, a wife that he reluctantly took on, but ultimately, although like you said, they don't talk, you can tell that he fell in love with her.
The way they looked at each other, you could see, and
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's really an interesting scenes because it shows human beings can communicate in very profound ways, even without language.
Sure. Now, what this scene, this was the I don't want to say I didn't like it because I thought there was a profound message in it, although I don't think the message was intended by the writers of the story. To me, this was the epitome of altruism because what
Where
ends
he
up happening,
goes off with the army
yes,
guys.
he gets guilted because they tell him. Now, we don't know for sure if that was his motivation, like you said, but it certainly seems so. And to go rescue people, he doesn't know. He risks his own life to go, and ultimately it resulted in the death of his family. The, and I'm just thinking, like, this guy was such a hero, but in our culture, the altruistic ethic is so pronounced that it's not even presented as if it was an evil thing or a wrong or horrible thing that he did. It's just like, oh, this was the consequence. But in my mind, it was just awful. Like, you literally sacrificed your family. And it's not like he just made the choice once, because when they got to the burial ground, he said, no, we can't go. We have to go around. And they said, no, we're going through whether you come with us or not. He could have returned home and said, I'm not having any part of this. He could have returned home and been there for his family, but he opted to go with them to rescue the people he doesn't know. And it's so profound to me when that happens. Have you ever seen the movie? What the hell is the name of it? Pay It Forward.
No, I haven't.
So Pay It Forward, it's this kid, Haley Joel Osment is in it, I believe that's who it was. And he's in school and they tell him as an assignment, what would you do to change the world if you could change the world? So he comes up with this idea that you, instead of paying people back, you pay it forward. So I do a nice deed for you, you do a nice deed for somebody else. And it's a lot of altruism throughout the movie. And at the end of the movie, the kid ends up getting killed because he goes to intervene in somebody else's fight. So he sacrifices himself and dies. And it's very heroic in the movie. What a good person he was. So I watched this as part of a program in prison. And they asked us at the end for our analysis. And all the other inmates were, not well, all except for one, my friend, but they're all, oh, what a good kid and so sad. And what I wrote was, what this movie demonstrates is the inevitable end to which altruism leads. The kid's 12 years old and dead because of the philosophy he adhered to. And that's when I watched this part of the movie, what it reminded me of. And I'm just, what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that was an altruistic thing he did that cost him his family?
Yes, but there's one caveat here, and that is there's no reference when he initially chooses to go to the fact that his family may be endangered. He doesn't say, as far as we know, doesn't think, therefore, that if I go, my I'm leaving my wife and kid unguarded, and the crow might butcher them. He has no reason to think the crow are his enemy yet, at that point. So I think at that point, it's like he's sacrificing his time with them, the time he could spend with them, in order to go on this rescue mission. If he had thought that this would put Swan and the boy, he named the kid Caleb, but I don't think he ever calls him Caleb. He always just calls him boy. But if he had thought that Swan and boy were endangered by this, then I would, if there was some reference to that, then I said it's a gigantic example of self-sacrifice. As it is, I don't think he did think that they were in danger. Maybe there was a hint of it at the burial ground. Perhaps at that point he should have said, "Go. I'm not being any further. This is put my wife. The crow are not going to be happy. This will put my wife and son in danger. I'm going home." But yeah, it's definitely an act of self-sacrifice. To me, the question is of how, that ultimately results in the murder of his family. But, I'm not sure how much of a sacrifice it was in the moment.
Sure. Even absent, I mean, you know that there are hostile natives in the area, but even if you're not considering that, you know that the terrain is rough, the elements are there, and he did leave a woman and a child in the cabin, knowing,
An Indian woman, though,
yeah,
somebody who's, adept at survival in this.
but he still knows that he could go off and certainly get killed
Yeah.
and leave them behind. So I don't know that he knew, you're right, at the time that he was necessarily putting them at risk. When he gets to the burial ground, I think that the issue is more prominent, but he certainly knew he was risking leaving them alone to fend for themselves, risking his own life for people that he didn't know who chose to be there in these
Yeah, I know. I
situations
get
too,
what you're saying. Remember, some of the trappers who had scores like that, had a score is a derogatory term, right? That's what the preacher calls her. Had wives, would often go off for months, trapping,
Is
and
that a derogatory term? I didn't know that. I thought that was
uh,
just a name for a native girl.
I think the way the Indians used it, the score just meant your wife. But I think for a lot of the white guys or the white people, you marry a squaw, like the preacher.
Oh, okay.
They were racist.
Sure,
So
sure.
I think it was for a lot of the whites, it was a racist term. But anyhow, they would go off for weeks or months at a time, trapping miles and miles away and leave their squaw, at home because those Indian girls were tough, man. They grew up like they grew up like that. But anyway, I agree with you. It's horrible, and made a million times more horrible. And I would have said, okay, listen, I'll take you. I'm not going to the burial ground. Take you that far, but in return, I would have said to the lieutenant, I get to shoot the preacher. All right. Then there would be some value in this. In
He
this.
came off as a real asshole, that preacher.
Yeah, yeah, he's a
When he
racist.
said
Yeah,
those are white Christians down there,
yeah,
as if, that should be the most important thing there. And
yeah,
it's interesting to me because I'll see that today. Politicians will say stuff like that about in other countries. There's Christian people over there.
yeah.
We
Oh,
should
yeah.
be
Oh,
defending
yeah.
the
There's all
Christian
kinds of
people.
racism. You see it even more so in Islam. But yes, it's certainly amongst a lot of the Christians or the Jews. To this day. And the preacher says, how long? I don't remember the exact wording, but how long you've been carrying that score or something like that. He says, and a sneer. And you married this Indian girl. What's wrong with you? You couldn't find a white woman, to
Yeah,
to
not in the woods, pal. Not in the woods.
yeah, but yeah, even so, Swan's great. Swan is she's attractive, and she's just a strong woman. I'd have fallen in love with her also.
All
Uh,
right, so he burns the cabin to the ground, and the guy's got, he's tough. So he
to put it
recovers.
mildly.
Yeah, he's internally got strength, so he does recover. And then what happens?
Then comes one of the most brutal scenes you're ever gonna see. He tracks the Crow war party that had butchered his family. There's like half a dozen of them when he finds them. and it's done, and it's done. Who's the director? Sidney Pollack. He does it, slowly. Johnson sees them in a copse of trees up ahead, and he takes off his coat. He's got these buffalo rifles, man. These rifles for killing grizzly bears or buffalo. He cocks each one of them. He takes one in each hand, and he advances, just silently on these Indian warriors, and he lifts the one. Robert Redford's left-handed, right? So I think he shoots with his left hand first. Oh man, I mean, this is a gun to shoot a buffalo or a grizzly bear. He just blows this one guy away and then lifts the other one. Boom, kills a second one. And then he's on him. He's swinging the rifle at him. He's stabbing him. He kills another one with a pistol. They stab him. I watched the scene any number of times. I think he kills 5 of these guys, scalps the last one, and then the other one, the sixth one, runs off and sings his death song. He's he's on his knees. He's singing his death song, and Johnson goes after him. He's looking at him. It's an intense scene, and he chooses to let him live. I'm not sure why. Maybe just the killings. He may just be sick of it.
Was that the guy? I think I was wondering. I watched the movie like 10 days ago, and it's the first time I ever saw it. But was that the same guy that came upon him when he was fishing earlier in the movie?
No, the guy that came upon him fishing was the chief. Paint
Oh, okay.
paint your shirt red or something. Paints his shirt red or something like that.
But
Uh,
the killing scene, a good director, when you have a scene, a revenge scene, makes you feel the revenge. Like you're so relieved and it feels like a release when the person gets the revenge. I felt that when I saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in the scene where Jack Nicholson finally just breaks and starts choking Nurse Ratched. It's just such a like a wow, like you're enmeshed in it. And they did that here. It was good how they, you get the feeling he's getting his revenge on these guys that murdered his family.
yeah, and he's not a somebody who takes any pleasure in killing. That earlier scene when he rescued Delq, who was buried up to his neck, and they went after I don't remember what tribe. I don't think they were Crow. Were they Blackfoot? I don't remember what
I
tribe.
think so, but he actually he didn't want any problems with them.
Yeah, he said, I don't want to kill, and but Del Q's, no, they stole my pony, they stole my pelts, and he kills these guys, and and Johnson, has to help him. He didn't take no pleasure in killing, and so his family's just been butchered. He's just killed 5 guys in the last 30 seconds, some with knives, and some of them with knives and everything, and he lets this guy live, which is an interesting choice that has consequences because the guy goes back to the Crow tribe, presumably, and the Crow send one warrior after another to kill Johnson. And one after another, the whole end of the movie is guys coming after him, and he kills this guy with his knife, and he kills this guy with a pistol. And there's like dozens of them. Must have been over a period of years. And he's out doing minding his business, trapping or whatever, and here comes the next guy, on horseback, like your next warrior, or they drop out of trees on him, or they shoot him from cover, or one guy comes up out of the water, and he kills all of these guys one at a time, and so at one point near the end of the movie, he meets Delq again. And they're in a camp, and they got the fire going and everything. And Delq says to him, given how many guys are after you, he says, I don't admire your choice of campsites, and Johnson, so again, getting scared, Del, and then watch the spear comes in, is thrown in and goes right between Delq's legs, just misses him. And the guy comes in and Johnson wrestles with him, kills him with a knife, and then he comes and sits down and they continue cooking the meal, and Delq, so, it's what does he say to him at that point? I don't even remember. But the scene that I do remember near the end is when he meets Bearclaw for the last time. It's cold, it's winter, it's snowing, the wind's blowing, he's cooking a rabbit, and Bearclaw comes riding up slowly, and he said, "You come far, pilgrim." And Jeremiah and Johnson says, feels like far. And he sits down. The dialogue in this movie is fascinating because it's so spare and the silences are so meaningful. And Johnson asks him, "Do you know what month of the year it is?" And Berkeley says, "No, I rightly don't. March, maybe." Yeah, well, Johnson says, "March, maybe, April." And Berkeley says, "Maybe March. I don't think April." You say, winter lasts long up this high, Bearclaw says. And he says to him, "You've done well. Keep all that hair when so many are after it."
You
And
know, that mistake, I guess you'd have to call it a mistake of letting the guy live. I've seen that, it seems, many times in many movies, but the one that I'm particularly thinking of is in Saving Private Ryan,
oh,
where they let the Nazi soldier live. And in the end, he kills the guy. And it's just that the directors that do that, they make it so, you're like, come on, why would you do this? Why would you let the guy live? It's going to come back and bite you. And of course, it always does. And you're like, oh, but it's just I don't know, it's a great thematic technique, I guess. I don't know the lingo that they would use, but anyway, so we're doing this in the framework of Romanticism.
wait, hold on a second. Let me a couple last points
Oh,
for
oh
you.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I just
Sorry.
remembered that scene with Delq when they're at the fire and the Crow warrior bursts in and they fight and Johnson kills him and Delq says to him, "It's always this way, always one at a time." And Johnson says, "Yes." Delq says, "For the Apache, they'd send 50 guys after you, you know. But anyway, so the final scene with Bear Claw, and he sits down. He says, "What's what?" And he said, "What are you cooking?" And John says, "Grown particular." And Bear Claw says, "Not about what I eat, just about the company I keep." And so Johnson breaks off a rabbit leg and tosses it to him. He munches on it. "You cook good rabbit, Pilgrim." He gets back on his horse I don't remember his words of parting, but he rides off into the snow, chasing Grizz, and Johnson goes back to his life of trapping, and the Indians, the Crow Indian warriors, keep coming after him, and finally, at the end, you meet the chief who was the one who saw him futilely trying to fish early in his mountain career. And this is the chief of the Crow, and this is his enemy. So Johnson reaches for his rifle, and the Crow chief, does this. Peace. So, and you can see Johnson's relief. Oh God, I don't have to. I don't have to be on alert every second for some Crow warrior trying to kill me. And he returns the peace sign, and now he's at peace with the Crow after killing dozens, and he gets stabbed with a spear at one point in these fights. He gets shot in the shoulder. It's amazing how much he survives. And at the end of the movie, the voiceover says, Jeremiah Johnson, I don't remember the exact wording, but some people say he died up there, and some people say he never will. He's like this legend. He becomes oh, we should mention that guy who was living in the cabin of the crazy woman when Johnson goes back there, and
Oh yeah.
he's got the kids hiding in the corn crib, and he got all the stuff the Crow leave there. "What's this?" Johnson says, and the guy says, "It's for you." The Crow made a little shrine to him, honoring his bravery and his prowess as a warrior, and they leave bits and pieces of stuff there in honor of him, like he's some kind of, demigod you know, or something that they pay homage to because he's such a. They say, a tribe's courage and prowess is judged by the courage and prowess of their enemies. Well, Johnson's a giant in that regard, so that
Sure.
that that elevates them that they have to have such an enemy. So
I'm not somebody who romanticizes the native tribes, especially not the Plains Indians.
they were warriors, man. They were
Sure.
rough dudes.
But from what I know, they were honest people. If they told you they're going to do something, you know it. So when the
Michael, I don't know how many John Wayne westerns I saw where Duke always says, "Indians hate a liar." He says over and over.
so it's telling that Jeremiah Johnson believes it when the guy says, you're good now.
Peace.
Yes, he
Yes,
doesn't
right,
question it. He
right.
knows I'm good
Yeah,
now.
yeah, right. There's peace.
So on the romanticism scale, free will, pursuit of values, I mean, while they're not my values, certainly, I mean, at least not the concretes of going to live out in the woods, you'd have to say this guy made a choice to go live in the woods. He pursued what he valued. In terms of his wife and adopted child, he made a choice. I'd say the wrong one, and I think he would too. But to go with the preacher and the army. So I think you'd have to say that there are very romantic elements to it. Would you agree with that? Is there anything that where you would say it fits more maybe with naturalism? Because it seems like
Overwhelmingly,
story.
he has his wife forced on him, but you know that's not a choice he makes. But he also what does Del Q say to him? You could take her, you got to marry her, but you could take her down to the trading store and trade her in for a pony or something. But he chooses not to, and he chooses to have a relationship with her, and they really bond. But yeah, and by the way, you got away with understatement, Michael, because you say go live in the woods. Live in the woods. They're in the high lonesome, man. It's just not just the woods. I don't know what the elevation is at some of these scenes, but the Pikes Peak, I think, is like 14,000 feet in Colorado. These are uh, terrain which is not only much more rugged than your average day in the woods, but the cold at that elevation. The winters are so long and it's so cold, and they really show. Uh, you know. So yeah, he makes this choice. He wants to be a mountain man, and he had no experience in it. He was a soldier. He was a young guy, and he makes this choice, and he seems to agree with him because he struggles, but he keeps at it, and he becomes an expert. He goes from a novice to an expert to a legend. Uh,
Sure. And there's never any hint that he regrets his decisions.
yeah. Del Q says to him near the end something because the crow are coming after him one at a time, trying to kill him. He says something like, "Why don't you go down to a town?" And Johnson says, "He said, Del, I've been to a town once." Something he says. you know, yeah. The what they don't say in this movie is as meaningful as what they do say. This is really a movie about men. Uh, and not just because it's mostly about men, other than Swan. She the only no, there's a crazy woman. Um, but these strong men, the way they communicate, the way he communicates, the way he and Bearclaw communicate, the way he and Dell communicate, they don't say a lot, but it's meaningful what they say. And what they don't say is meaningful. The way they just look, you know, at each other is the stereotype is, well, women will sit around and gab, and they'll men like this, they don't say much, but they don't have to. They act what they say, they mean what they say, and then there's other ways to communicate besides speaking, as you especially see with him and Swan. Um,
That's true. That's a good point that I hadn't considered. But as I'm quickly going through the various characters, it's also about different types of men, right? Because you have the Jeremiah Johnson, who's, sort of the quiet type, but he's rugged, he's tough, honorable guy. Bearclaw is out of his mind. The scene where he's running from the grizzly is just,
He's got a stick. He's got a
it's
stick. He's
hilarious.
poking at the bear to keep him from eating them.
Yeah, but he's an honorable guy
Oh yeah, without a
nonetheless.
doubt. Yeah, yeah.
The Del Q character is not so much honorable. I mean, he doesn't. He just seems like maybe a bit shifty. Like when he killed the Indians, he wasn't supposed to, but and then
Well,
you
they
have
did
the
they did steal his stuff. And
Yeah.
they left him
Well, they
buried
did
up
leave
to
him.
up
Yeah.
to his
Yeah.
chin in the sand.
And then you have the Indian who gives his word about the peace, so he's an honorable type. You have the preacher who's more of just an asshole, right?
Mhm.
So it's a different archetypes, maybe is the word I'm looking for, of men. It was a movie about men, and I didn't previously think of that. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, it's definitely, and most of them are honorable. I get your point about Delq, uh, but nevertheless, he's a benign force. He in the film, he tells Johnson,
He
listen,
did
because
something else though, didn't he? Didn't he leave him or something? I can't
yeah,
remember.
well, on his wedding, he says, I don't want to interfere with your wedding night, Jeremiah. He
Yeah,
goes, he hugs Swan. Have a great wedding night, Mrs. Johnson. He hops on his horse
yeah,
and he leaves. Um, because he was put in danger by Johnson's inadvertent offering
yeah.
to the chief of all these gifts. He's headed for the tall timber, which is not that far off. But he tells Johnson, you turn down this gift, they're gonna skin us both alive. He has knowledge, and he shares. But yeah, yeah he's emotionally, I think, wilder and more unstable and more unpredictable. So I don't think he's dishonorable, but he's just emotionally little less under control than Johnson. And Bear Claw, as crazy as he is predictable. I don't know if he would have hopped on his horse and ridden away when Johnson acquired himself a wife. You get away from the Indians who might skin us alive if they don't like the choice that you make here. Um, but yeah, these are real men. These are rugged guys, ooze masculinity from every pore. And I think the film makes a study of what, this John Wayne type guys, with these tough guys, but good guys, they're not bullies. Not even Delq. I think. Well, he kills those Indians, but they did rob him and leave him up to his neck in the sand. But these good strong men, the Navy SEAL types, the good guys. You don't want to bleep with them, and
No, they're tough
yeah,
guys.
they're real tough guys, but they're good guys. If you don't, they might end the fight, but they won't start it, and yeah, it studies them, the way they interact. It's fascinating. They don't say much, but they mean what they say, and what they say has meaning, and what they don't say, the nonverbal communication, the looks in the eyes and everything. It's just grasp the hand, and the strong, manly, friendly, affectionate, respectful glance. It's all very manly, and can see why Swan falls in love with Johnson. You know, Johnson. She says at one point, she see why she falls in love with him. There's a hilarious scene where he's teaching her to say yes. You remember that scene?
I don't know.
Oh, he says he's teaching us. He's trying to get her to nod her head. She's afraid, of him touching us. What does he say to her? Mighty hunter, yes. And she says, yes. He goes, fine figure of a man, yes. She says, yes. That's all you need to know, he tells him. Yeah. But he's a real man, and he's good to her, as a real man should be to a woman, especially to his wife. And she falls in love with him, and he falls in love with her. And so, and yeah, again, the nonverbal communication in this case, because they don't speak the same language, it's very well done, very touching. It's very deep, about the human soul and the way we can communicate with each other, the way we can bond, the way we can value together. Even if we're tough men that don't have much to say, the strong,
Unlike us,
silent type.
the two of us, we have a lot to say.
We're valuable. We're not tough guys. We're a couple of wimpy Jewish intellectuals.
That's awesome. Well, I hope the next one you pick is a good one too.
Wait. Let me say one last thing about this, Michael, before we
Yeah, go
sign off.
ahead. All right, go ahead.
Turns out this story, the movie, is based on a book called Crow Killer about a real life mountain man, Liver Eaton Johnson. His
Oh,
name.
wow.
Yeah, his first name I think was actually John. It was John Jeremiah Johnson, something like that. But his nickname was Liver Eating Johnson because, according to legend, I don't know if this is true or not, because a lot of this stuff, myths grow up around these mountain men, you know. But according to legend, the crow killed his wife, that he was married to a flathead Indian girl. The crow warriors made the mistake of killing her, and that was like 1847, I think. For like 15, 16, 17 years, he was at war with the crow. According to what I read, he's estimated to have killed 300 of them and eaten their livers before they finally made peace. I don't know how much of this is true, how much of it's apocryphal, but it's a hell of a story. I haven't read the book. I could get it from Amazon. Crow Killer, I think is the name of it. The story of Liver Eaton Johnson. Uh,
I've never heard about the taste of the cuisine of human liver. I haven't come
I don't
across
know. I
that.
don't know. These guys are so crazy, Michael. I don't know if he even cooked it. He might have eaten it raw. I don't know if he cooked it or ate it raw. I don't know.
Oh my goodness. All right. So Andy, where can people find you?
Well, I'm not hard to find. My website is andrewbernstein.net. You know, they could find me on Facebook, on Twitter. Do I have any of my books here, Michael? Let me see. I usually have.
Yeah, come on. What do you're
Oh
slacking?
yeah, yeah. I know. Sorry. I got my book on education here. Is that visible? Can you see it?
Why Johnny still can't read or write or understand math and what we can do about it.
Yes.
And Andrew Bernstein on the bottom is the
Yes,
important part.
this is my book on education. This is I got my book on heroes, heroes, legends, champions, why heroism matters. My
Your book
novel.
on capitalism came very highly recommended from Mark Pellegrino. He touted it when he was on the show the other day.
Oh, the Capitalist Manifesto, you mean?
Yeah.
The historic, economic, and philosophic case for laissez-faire. Yeah, there's a lot of good information in the Capitalist Manifesto. My version is the number of Capitalist Manifestos. My version has a lot of information, especially on the history of capitalism. The economists have done a great job showing how capitalism is a much more efficient economic system than any other. Paris gets fed, as Frederick Bastiat put it. Ayn Rand showed the moral and philosophical case for capitalism in Atlas Shrugged. But the history of capitalism is so maligned by Marxist intellectuals. The Capitalist Manifesto has a true version, an accurate account of the history of capitalism and its glorious history of raising living standards, raising life expectancies, right from
Oh,
the
I
jump.
think I think I'm gonna have to get it and then have you on to talk about it. It
Yeah,
sounds
sure,
great.
sure, let's do it.
I'll tell you something funny. You might get a kick out of this, and then I'll let you go. When you said there's a lot of books called the Capitalist Manifesto, the name of my show is The Rational Egoist, which is a common phrase amongst the objectivists,
Hmm.
rational egoism, rational selfishness. So a guy from my home state, I've got a lot of haters from when I was a regular on the local radio show. So this guy came across somebody else's show called The Rational Egoist, and he thought he had me. And he starts posting, "You're a plagiarist, you're a fraudster, and I'm going to call you out." And I told him, "Go ahead." I said, "You're just making a fool out of yourself. You don't even know how bad it is." He said, "You can block me, whatever." I said, "Block you? I'm going to repost what you had to say."
Right,
So
right.
anyway, so Professor Humor, Michael Humor, he comes on and leaves a comment, and he says, "You know how many other cases of plagiarism I was able to find on Amazon?" He said, "For instance, do you have any idea how many people have called their books Basic Physics?"
Yeah, right, right.
I got a great laugh
Say, hey,
out of
yeah, really. Say, hey, pal, you cannot copyright a title.
it.
Today, if you want to publish a book titled Gone with the Wind, you're free to do so. And it could be 50 people with a podcast titled The Rational Egoist,
And
or
it wouldn't
100.
be it wouldn't be a surprise among objectivists.
Yeah, and it's completely legit.
Yeah. All right, Andy, thank you so much. And get that brain of yours to work and pick out another movie for us.
This is fun, Michael. I
It's
definitely
great.
will. All right,
Okay.
all right. Thanks, buddy.
For
Take
now,
care.
this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Liebowitz. Till next time.